active group gathering that's increasing, and we don't hear too many stories of that these days. So that's nice to hear. So the next couple of minutes, we just want to leave it like we do every week for a check-in for people to be able to ask any questions, particularly questions about this session, about the resilience, the extra resilience class, about the breakouts, or anything that you would find useful to know or gain more information and more insight. It's just a chance to have a collective check-in before we do the small breakouts, which I also enjoy very much. And to say hello from wherever you are in the world. So any questions coming up for you this week that you think might be useful for the rest of this group as well to hear or to add to? And you can put your hand up, or you can just continue smiling and be silent. And we'll see how quick Michael is. So there's another Michael. Michael has a wave here. So Michael Bannister, you have a question for us.
Hey, Shane, I like your team jersey. And I hear your daughter got able to go outside now.
Thanks, Michael. Thank you. It's true that, well, I'm pretending that I have the ability to get outside myself and do sport, but I haven't had the opportunity yet. But soon I can see the horizon being brighter, and it's true that my daughter Kira has now got the opportunity once a day to go out in the local vicinity. So it's a great relief. I'm a little bit detached from my daughter and wife right now. We're separately cocooning, but we know that we'll be together again soon. So thanks for your concern, and for everybody, I hope you're all as well as you can be right now.
Yeah, I mean, for this and future ones, I think, touching on just the continuing practicing, managing time when here we are locked in our different units or areas, but practicing can be difficult, or just setting up times and doing it regularly. So, I mean, just touching on that and reminding people about that, I think would be really helpful.
The practices themselves, Michael?
Just maintaining and doing the practice. Setting up a schedule, picking out the time of days to do it. I think what's really helpful with any of these skills is that you can really do them at any time you need to. And that's certainly a lot of what I use it for, but that practicing the piece of it helps to strengthen it and really improves the results when you need it the most. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you, Michael, for throwing that in. You're so right. John is going to come in now, but before you do, John, Michael, it's like anything. You do yoga, you go for a run, you do any type of practice, you appreciate it afterwards, but it's the discipline to actually put it into action. And nobody ever regrets once you've done the practice, and we feel the benefits. So it's just about setting a routine up. And I'm not certainly the champion of doing that, but I appreciate what you're saying. So thank you. John, or Jan, you're muted there, so we're just going to unmute you if we can.
Actually, a follow-up to Michael. I'm glad, Michael, that you asked that question, because one of the things that I wonder about is, what does the research show about how much time in practicing something is necessary in order to actually get the neuroplasticity, the actual changes? Obviously, one thing is just this quick thing about just grounding, but things like different forms of meditation, as an example, loving kindness meditation, or other forms of meditation. What does the science tell us about how much you need to do this in order to get some benefit?
I know that there's definitely scientists that are dying to get in and answer this question straight away, and it'll be a competition. But from my quick take is that, like any other muscle, the brain being a muscle, I mean, the more you practice it, that time probably decreases, and the more efficient we get at getting those practices and connecting it within our resilience zone. But maybe we'll hand it to a scientist that knows a little more about rather than an Irishman just talking out loud.
Well, I'll just mention that there are studies that show that with practices like MBSR, so mindfulness-based stress reduction, and others, that it really doesn't take a whole lot. I think it's very similar to other skills that we learn, where there's a kind of a very quick ramp up, but then the incremental benefits come with seemingly much more practice. So with MBSR, for example, which recommends about 45 minutes a day, which still a healthy dose. They do show significant increases in our ability to hold attention and to maintain these practices. One thing I'll add, without going too down this rabbit hole, and I know that John could have this conversation all day, but without getting too down the rabbit hole, is that unlike something like practicing the piano, where a researcher could watch and say, oh, John is practicing the piano and he's done that 20 minutes a day for 10 days, compared to Shane, who only did it 5 minutes a day for 10 days. And we can see the differences in their outcomes. It's very difficult to measure the internal process of meditation. So if I am doing an MBSR course and I say, okay, everyone, we're going to track the benefits of this practice over the next 10 weeks, do this 45 minutes a day. Even if somebody is reporting that, yes, I have done this 45 minutes a day, then it's hard to know what the experience was like for them. So if I spend 45 minutes mind wandering, which is perfectly natural and a part of our default mode network, then am I really doing the same thing as maybe John, who's sitting for 45 minutes and his mind only wandered for 5 minutes during that 45 minutes? So there's a lot of challenges still in the research and how we measure it. But what we say in CIT ultimately is just that you are your own laboratory and you do these practices and you see how it shows up in your life. And if the benefit is there, then obviously we hope that you'll continue to practice. One other quick thing I'll say, and then I want to get to Barbara, who has her hand raised, is that we're also encouraging people to do informal practice. And so yes, it's very important, as Michael very rightly said, is to try to set a time aside each day when you can take 10, 15 minutes, 40 minutes to do practice. But it's also important to integrate these practices into your daily routine so that Jennifer shared with me, just if I might, Jennifer, a really great example where she was folding clothes after doing the laundry. And so this is an activity she does all the time and just kind of does it mindlessly. But yet she started tracking sensations while she was doing it and using it as a quasi kind of grounding practice and feeling how there's different sensations with a towel versus maybe some work clothes versus a different item of clothing. And so that's something that she's just integrating into her daily life. And we can do that with all of these practices. From a CIT perspective, one of the things we're working on now is to formalize those informal practices a little bit so that we can be more directive with those. But both are really important, and there is evidence to suggest that both have an impact on that neuroplasticity. Let's get to Barbara, and then let's jump into breakouts because our time goes so fast.
Okay, hello everyone.
Hello.
Shane asked how everyone is doing with what we have learned. So I wanted to share that over the weekend I planted an herb garden. And that activity stretched over an entire day. Also came with my oldest son tackling our huge bamboo. So it had everything. It had grounding, it had tracking, it had so many different senses of buying my little herbs and buying the soil, digging in the soil, planting it, putting it out there, at the same time seeing on next door someone had a bunch of baby aloe vera plants left over. So picking them up and exchanging really loving kindness to the neighbor. So all senses were involved in this activity, and it was so healing and whole, I think. Yeah.
Thanks, Barbara. And for those that have the ability to do that, it's a great way of connecting many of the components. So thank you for sharing that. Michael, to our shared groups.
Yes, so I will, as with the previous weeks, you should get sent right into the breakouts with a facilitator or two. And if you joined the call after I created the breakouts, you'll be not in a breakout right away, but I will send you there very quickly, so be patient. And then the other thing is I'll just say to our facilitators, maybe the first question actually should just check in to see if anyone is new to the group, because I realized last week that we had some new people, so some of the language we were using and stuff didn't quite connect right away. So I'm going to go ahead and open those rooms and send people away.
practices and the importance of both, so that when we are stressed out or we are out of our resilient zone, we have the ability to call on those practices with a little bit more ease than if we hadn't practiced them when we were not stressed out. So that was part of our conversation. And the last part of our conversation was about self-compassion and understanding that we need to take care of ourselves so that we can better take care of others. Because if we're not able to, the image of the oxygen mask, if we don't put our own masks on first, then we're really not able to help and or care for others. So being able to use and practice some of that self-compassion as well were some of the things that we talked about in our group.
That's great. And as all the practices obviously we've been doing help us with that self-cultivation, but now that we're going to extend this for a few more weeks, at least we'll start to get into some of the self-compassion practices that we do in CIT as well. So that's great. Over to you.
So we're gonna do a resourcing practice. So for those of you who have been with us, this may be familiar somewhat. And for those of you who have not been with us before or are coming to us after having been away for a little while, if you would be so kind as to find a relaxed and comfortable position for you, whatever that looks like. You could be seated, you could be lying down, you could be whatever works for you. If you're more comfortable turning off your camera, please feel free to do that as well. But we're going to find a relaxed, potentially upright position. We want to be able to have some focus. You want to be able to have some stability and clarity, the stability to keep our minds from not falling asleep. We don't want to fall asleep during our practice, but we do want to be comfortable enough to be able to get into a space that is going to be helpful for us. And bring to mind a resource. And a resource can be anything that you find, a person, a place, a memory, a thing, an internal quality that you possess that helps you feel calm, peaceful, resourceful, strong. Anything that you find to be a resource for you. And just bring that to mind and sit with that resource for a moment. And as you're sitting with that resource for a moment, bring to mind as vividly as possible the senses, all 5 senses, and how they connect to your resource. What are you seeing? What are you smelling? What are you hearing? What are you touching? What are you even tasting? Using all of our senses, bring that resource to life for you. As you're thinking about your resource and bringing it to life using all of your senses, track some of the sensations in your body. Find a pleasant or neutral sensation and sit with that for a moment as well. As you're paying attention to those sensations, those pleasant or neutral sensations, think back to your resource. Is there anything else you want to add to your resource? Can you pull out or tease out any additional sensations? Any additional colors, sounds, smells, textures, tastes? As we bring this resourcing practice to a close, go back and track the sensations in the body and spend a moment on any pleasant or neutral sensations. And when you are ready, you can gently open your eyes if you've had them closed, and turn on your camera if you wish to, and then come back to the room with us. Thank you. Does anybody have any thoughts that they would like to share from the practice? Yes, Michelle, I see your hand up. And then Shoshana. Michelle, I think you're muted.
Muted for so
There
long.
we go.
Good. Okay. I felt that I moved through the pleasure of the taste and the tactile, and I came to realize how much this resource means to me throughout my life and how I'm using it now to strengthen my present transition or continuing transition in a comfortable vein. But what I found interesting was I started to judge myself because I was thinking, oh, this is great. Now I need to get a different chair. I need to get an extension for my table. And then I went into the guilt phase because it was a material thing that I was feeling that I needed for inner peace.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that.
I think it connects so well with the practice we're about to do, right? Which is just noticing the way the mind works and the way those things just kind of emerge, and then having the ability, it sounds like you already recognize, that's probably not a beneficial mental state. I don't want to get too caught by those thoughts that are emerging. But yeah, it's crazy.
Shoshana, I see you've turned your mic on. Would you like to share, please?
I would, yeah. When you said, is there anything else you want to add to the resource? I was visualizing a particular in my yard that is just starting to flow trees, and it smells sweet and it's beautiful. It's like a big cotton puff or a cloud. And when I was thinking, well, what else is there? What else am I not seeing? I got this strong connection to the root. The only reason it can do all this up here is because it's grounded down there. And wow.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Shoshana. Thank you. Other thoughts? I want us to have time to get to the other practice, but if there's other thoughts people would like to share, I'd love to
Saw
hear.
Rosaria
Rosaria?
Katie.
Okay.
Hey, Jennifer,
Maybe that'll be the last one.
Yeah, I had actually a similar experience that Michelle had. And that's the first time I've done this resource almost on a daily basis, and it's been serving me wonderfully. But while we did it, and you were keep on, guiding us, a person came into my mind, and is a person who is a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, but he's no longer in my life because both of us don't serve us well. And as soon as he came, I had this beautiful physical sensation, a great time we had, and was tracking myself, all is well. And then the mind came in. It's like, wait a minute, you guys don't serve each other any longer. This person is out. But then the other observers say, like, no, this is a resource because it brought you joy. And I let it be. But I had a few seconds of mind, kind of like mind, heart, body fighting over each other. And it took me a minute to say, okay, this is the time to just let it. And so I'm grateful. This is the first time that I've had this experience with the resources. So just observing. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Rosaria. And yes, as Michael said, that's probably a very good lead into our next practice.
Yeah, one of the things also to note that you both have noted is that what we call that is that a resource has split. So a resource that is something that can generate all these pleasant and neutral sensations and make us feel better, oftentimes have a dual nature, and they have the ability to also bring up things of loss or things that trigger us in certain ways. And so that's when we call that the resource has split. And you have two choices there. Either you can do what you did, Rosaria, and it sounds like you too, Michelle, just shift your attention, recognize it's happening, and then just shift your attention back to pleasant or neutral sensations and the parts of the resource that are really serving you well. But if it's constantly a problem and it's generating too many issues, then you just change your resource, right? Start saying, okay, I'm going to start developing other resources, right? And so that's something that's very common. So I would feel comfortable with that. So thank you all for that. We're going to now do a practice that's called resting the mind in its natural state. It's also often called open monitoring. And in this, what we're going to do is we're going to start by bringing our attention to our breath and just the body breathing as a focused attention practice. And what we're going to then do is we're going to shift our attention from our breath to just allow our minds to be spacious and to allow our bodies and minds just to be. And we sit back as kind of an observer, just observing what's happening and what's unfolding in the space of our minds and bodies. The goal of this is not to empty the mind of thoughts. It's not to have any particular types of thoughts. The only thing we're trying to do here is remain in that observer position. And there's a difference, and you'll probably experience this firsthand, of being that observer or being kind of lost in the process of the thoughts or experiences or sensations that you're experiencing in the present moment. And again, just like we've said with all these practices, this is a practice, right? It's something that will strengthen over time. We will get caught by our own thoughts. We will get lost in our own thoughts. We will start to think about the table and needing a new chair, and or the the experiences with the person that we had a relationship with, and why didn't this work, and this, that, and the other. And next thing you know, we're spending a minute and a half off in narrative land, right? Those are totally normal. And to be expected. The key is that we'll catch it every once in a while. We'll kind of wake up to that and go, wait a second, no, I'm just supposed to be here as the observer. And we'll just gently return to that position. And with that, we're doing another one of those repetitions in the gym, if you will, for our minds to help us stay in that place a little bit longer each day. The ultimate reason we're trying to do this is to cultivate what we call equanimity. the ability to see our experiences with a bit of a distance so that we don't get either caught by them or we don't try to push them away. We don't say, oh, wait, that was an angry thought. I'm not supposed to be angry. I'm not going to have that thought. What we need to do is just practice allowing the anger to be there. And then we can decide, is this beneficial to me or is this harmful to me? Is this maybe say a thought that's saying, well, I should hit this person? Well, maybe that's not really beneficial to me and I don't want to just act out that thought. I want to be able to observe it a little bit. Maybe it's a thought that says, well, what I want to do is hand this person some money if I see somebody on the street or whatever. And maybe I have to evaluate, is that beneficial or is it not beneficial? The key is trying to over time not get lost in our own experiences so that we can begin to gain some equanimity over those thoughts and emotions and be able to then choose how we respond to them as opposed to being just guided along by them kind of blindly. So what we'll do is we'll use metaphors such as the blue sky that we talked about last week, where our minds are going to be like the blue sky, and all we're doing is looking at the clouds as they pass. Some of them may be storm clouds. That's okay. Some of them may be beautiful rainbows. There may be beautiful rainbows in that sky. That's great too. But we're not going to grab hold of any of them or try to push them away. Just allow them to be. So I hope that makes sense. We'll do that experientially. And we already had a couple of great examples, even during the resourcing practice, of how the mind works that way. And one thing I'll underscore before we start this practice is be gentle with yourself, because two things. One is, this is the way our minds work. There's something called the default mode network, which is where our minds go when we are not honing our attention on a particular object. And it's a very natural thing, and it actually serves our survival very well, because it's planning for the future, it's thinking about the past, it's ruminating on things that could be harmful to us. It doesn't necessarily serve us well sometimes, so we have to be careful of it, but it's a very natural place for our minds to go. So that's number one. I would be, be very gentle with yourself. So it's very natural, and it can also, as I mentioned, can be very beneficial. So for those of us that like to be creative, and you're like, oh my God, the greatest idea just came to me when I was sitting in the shower, not thinking about anything. That's your default mode network at work, right? So we don't want to get rid of that, but we just want to start to recognize when we're in it because we choose to be, versus when we're in it and just following along blindly. Okay, so with that, I'm going to ask you just to take a relaxed and upright posture. If you are able, it can be useful to take a upright posture where you have a bit of attention, where you're kind of having that, reflecting those qualities of clarity and stability. If that's not a comfortable position for you, then by all means choose a position that is comfortable for you. At any time during the practice, you can always bring to mind a resource. So if at any time you're getting triggered, you're having difficulty with the practice, you're feeling that you're judging yourself for whatever reason, always feel free to bring a resource to mind and kind of regulate our nervous system. That's always available to you. If we're ready, then we're going to go ahead and begin the practice by taking 3 deep breaths. And we're going to just fill body with oxygen, and then release it slowly as you allow your body to soften and relax. Again, a second deep breath, feeling the body almost like you're blowing up a balloon in your belly, and then slowly drawing your belly button back towards your spine. Kind of allow all that to release. And then with the final deep inhalation, kind of draw all your attention into the present moment. And as you release, feel yourself grounded in your body in this moment. Now allow your breathing just to return to its natural pace. Don't try to control it. And then just experience your body breathing. Resting your attention on a place in the body where it's easiest and most pronounced, whether that's at your belly, your chest, your nostrils. Just hold your attention lightly on that place. And now let's shift our attention from our breath to our unfolding inner experiences. Allow your mind to be like a blue sky. Anything that appears there, just allow it to appear there, just as the sky doesn't prefer a cloud over a bird, a rainbow. Just whatever arises in the space of your mind, just observe it, trying not to be caught by it or pushing it away. And allow it to just pass away as it will do in its natural course. If your mind wanders off into thoughts of the future or memories of the past, just notice it and gently come back to the present moment. Simply observe what is appearing in the space of your mind. As we bring this short practice to a close, let's bring our attention back to the sensations of the body and a place in the body that's feeling supported or grounded by another object, and tracking any neutral or pleasant sensations. And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes and rejoin us. So again, we have a guided audio practice on our website for that. And then It's a practice, obviously, you can do on your own without the audio guide, just by taking a comfortable posture, focusing for a little bit on your breath, and then opening up to a wider awareness. And hopefully over time, what begins to happen is being able to see that that first of all, these thoughts and feelings, emotions, they're impermanent. They arise seemingly out of nowhere, oftentimes, and that we don't have to be so attached to them or so averse to them, that we can allow them their space, allow them to be there. It doesn't mean we have to act on them. You know, one of the things in kind of more Western psychology, one of the mantras has been, well, if you don't express it, you're going to repress it. And we don't want to repress our emotions. And so then you get a lot of expressing of emotions. Well, there's also a third way. We can just be present to it and allow it to be there without repressing it, but also without expressing it. And then we can choose, is this something we want to express? And so that's the goal of the practice over time, is to begin to see that we don't have to get caught by these things. We can just allow them to be there. And guess what? If we don't do anything, what happens to them? They disappear. They move on. Now they may come back, that's sure, but from moment to moment, they're constantly changing. So any thoughts or questions before we wrap up for this week on that practice? Michelle, did you raise? I didn't. Yeah, Michelle.
I've
Yeah.
had hand raising hesitation my whole life because I think I take up too much time on the floor. But
You're fine.
I've been reading, I love Zen, and I've been reading the Dalai Lama conversation with, I can't think of his name, it's not good. The leader in South Africa. Anyway, long story short.
Desmond Tutu?
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
Okay. So the Dalai Lama talks about the mind being empty is a waste of energy. And I was just hoping that what he's getting at is once we can actually be still, then we could use our mind to direct for positivity and universal compassion. So this is where I flux with the different types of meditations, because I do want to use my energy for positivity and benefit the world, not just my own stillness.
Yeah, sure. That's where we talk about self-cultivation, right? As being in that place where you can come to that stillness, where you can have more of that equanimity. But that's a firm foundation for then relating to others and starting to do action in the world, right? So
Right.
yeah, I
Right.
agree with you. One of the things I didn't mention is you may experience while doing that practice, and many people do experience this, there's, you know, we kind of tend to experience life as like clouds are constantly coming through. It's a bird, it's a plane, it's, you know, not Superman, but you know, it's going through all the time. And yet when we're actually experiencing it, there are going to be moments where all there is the blue sky, and the mind is empty. And then all of a sudden we go, wait, my mind was just empty. Well, that's a thought. That's another, now we have a cloud again, right? The goal is not to achieve that state, but it is a byproduct of that practice. Because one of the things, the metaphor we use also is like if you have a glass vase that's filled with sand and debris and stuff and water, and you constantly stir it, it's constantly going to have stuff floating around in it. Well, oftentimes, like if those are mental states, we try to stop it. We try to calm it by saying, stop thinking this, and you should be thinking that. You shouldn't be thinking this. You should, and well, all you're doing is constantly stirring, and all that's going to do is keep all that stuff floating around. If you actually just stop stirring, then eventually it will settle. And that's part of that practice. Is if you just we're not stirring anymore. We're not grabbing. We're not pushing. We're just trying to allow some space to just be with those different mental states. And eventually there are times when there's no mental state. It's just, you're just being in the present moment. So we're already past time, but if there's one last thought or comment before we adjourn for the week. Fabrizia.
Yes, I just would like to, if we can later, talk a little bit about intention, because I understand that the thoughts, maybe they don't matter that much as we would think they do, but our committed actions that are guided by our values. But then I think about intention. Intention, to me at least, seems so important. And what is the nature of intention, and how intention participates in this state of mind? Just a thought that I had now.
Yeah, I think that's a really key component of it. And one of the things that we kind of start in the first premise of CIT is that we have compassion at the core. And again, that's not based on a kind of woo-woo kumbaya. It's based on our biology, our physiology, our survival. It's based on the fact that we look at what we're doing here. We're coming together because we need each other in these times, right? We crave social connection. And that's not an accident. That's a fact of our biology, physiology, the way we survive in for thousands of years. And so that means that we have compassion at the core. So, and beyond just that compassion for our in-group, we can use our rational mind to think about why we also need people that we would otherwise maybe consider in our out-group. So through the real study of interdependence, again, this is stuff we go into much more detail in the course, but we can do practices of interdependence to realize that this compassion should not just be about my family, but it should also be about the stranger. It should also be about people I might consider an enemy. And so these are all practices that we can do that work to set that intention, right? Is to say, ultimately, that beneficial mental state is one that leads me to happiness and others to happiness. And that is the driver of that intention. Why do I do all this? And the goal in series 1 within CIT is to get to a place at the end of the 4th skill where we are motivated now to set that intention to not just work for my own well-being, but the well-being of others, which is when we jump into common humanity and impartiality. So now I've gone way over. So thank you, everybody. This was wonderful. If you keep showing up, I think we'll keep showing up. So for the foreseeable future, please stay healthy, stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you next week. All the best, everyone.